Welcome to On Texas Football. Hope you guys are having a good Saturday afternoon, evening, and into it. Jerry, Jonathan Cunningham, linebacker out of North Crowley, committed to the Longhorns yesterday evening. I want to talk a little bit about that, give some folks a little Saturday update on recruiting, because you wrote an article for On Texas Football this morning. I thought kind of laid things out, but I want to add some additional color to that. Let's start, though, with the news of the day, and that came last night, again, from Jonathan Cunningham, young man out of North Crowley. He commits to the Longhorns over Utah, as well as TCU and others. What are your baseline thoughts on Jonathan and his pledge to the Horns?
Well, I think he's got a lot of upside. I think he's an instinctive guy. He's got long arms. He really flows to the football in a instinctive manner. I think his upside's there. Very similar to Anthony Smith last year from a frame standpoint. 6'2", probably 193 pounds right now. 79-inch wingspan. Good hand size. Good athlete. Brother was a really good player ahead of him, by the way. So I think Johnny Nansen identified him early, which I thought was interesting, Bobby. He identified him early as a guy he really liked. Look at those long arms there on that play. And then just the dexterity to pick up the ball and get going. But look, he's a guy that Johnny Nansen identified when he got the Texas job. I think he already really liked him at Arizona. But then they sent Sark through, and Sark and Tashard Choice stopped by the school and offered him on February 1st. And at that time, what's interesting, Bobby, was Jonathan Cunningham was at the January 20 Junior Day and was pretty disappointed Texas didn't offer at that time. But I think Texas was still getting their ducks in a row with Nansen being on board, kind of working through the portal. And then they decided, yep, this is a guy that really fits what we're looking for. So they went on him, and they came back from the pack because they were behind since they didn't offer January 20th. That put Texas behind the eight ball a little bit. But the kid took a measured approach to the recruiting process. He visited Arizona State. He visited Kansas. He visited Utah. He visited TCU in May. He visited Texas. Thought about visiting Missouri as well because they really got on him late, but he didn't make that trip. But ultimately, I think it came down to TCU and Texas. I know he had some fun with the Utah shirt on his announcement, but I think this really came down to the three schools, Texas, TCU, and Utah. But there was a belief around him that he wasn't going that far from home. So TCU really tried to sell the stay at home, like in your hometown, play early in the recruitment. But I think Texas laid out a good plan for his development. I think Johnny Nansen was communicated very well with Jonathan Cunningham, how he fit in the Texas scheme. And I think Texas having Anthony Smith host Jonathan Cunningham, I think was really smart because they are two similar frame players, and physical development's really key for those guys. But yet Anthony Smith made his mark late in the spring, Bobby, even though he was undersized. He really flashed, and the Texas staff has liked what they've seen from Anthony Smith. So I thought he was able to send a really good message to Jonathan Cunningham of, yeah, this physical development is very key for you and me, but that doesn't mean you can't come in and maybe make an impact anyways.
I want to say this. I think it's important. This is a guy that's a winner. He's played for the state semifinals, a team that's a really good team. He wants to win big. And I think he wants to do it on a big-time stage.
Yes.
The SEC is that stage. The Longhorns, the big-time state institution in the state of Texas. There's no better place than the orange and white. So good pickup there for Texas. Happy to see young man out of North Crowley end up being a Longhorn. Now, there's other news coming down the pike. Monday, Nick Townsend, big tight end out of Spring Decaney, makes his announcement. He has been on the Texas board from the get-go, somebody that they wanted from the outset, 6'3", 235 or so, Jerry. Is that accurate?
Yep.
He is, I don't know if he's the number one tight end on the board because we can't say that for sure, but he sure looks like he could be with his speed and athleticism, ran a 10.9 100 meter. Where do you think this decision is coming down to for Nick Townsend, young man out of Spring Decaney?
Yeah, I think when the June visit started, it was Alabama and Texas. And I think Alabama had the lead after a spring visit. I think that kind of dissipated. They fell off a little bit, and it became Texas, USC, Texas A&M. A&M has really sold him on you team up with Keody Armstrong, and this will be the best tight end room in the country. And there you see, watching the video, Nick Townsend, he's just a stud, top 100 player in the country at edge or tight end. I think he's that good. But I think USC obviously had a really good visit out there. His teammate Tanook Hines could pick USC Monday right after him. We'll see if that's USC or Notre Dame. Texas also in the picture. But I really think Texas has done a good job kind of illustrating what Jatavion Sanders did, what Gunnar Helm's doing at Texas, what Nyblack could do, and what Texas could do for him at the tight end position under Steve Sarkisian in this offense. And I think as long as Texas has been able to communicate that well with him close to home, I think that resonates. We'll see what he announces tomorrow. I think Texas has been at a pretty good spot since the official visit, and even before that a little bit. So I think Texas in a pretty good spot entering tomorrow. We'll see what he decides, but USC and A&M are the main competition.
You and I both got doubled up there. You're saying tomorrow. I'm saying tomorrow. We're recording this on Saturday. He actually announces Monday. But
4 p.m. 4 p.m. Central.
You and I are getting ready for the SEC Media Days. Yeah. We're headed up to Dallas early tomorrow, so it's going to be a whirlwind for us. But he announces at 4 p.m., by the way, on Monday, 4 p.m., 10-9 100 meter, as you can see there on the footage that we're showing on the video right now. Just able to run away from guys, plays both sides of the ball, just a really active player all the way around. He's a little bit better athlete, in my opinion, Jerry, and more explosive than Jatavion Sanders.
Not even close.
And I'd say that with all due respect, with Jatavion, I think, what do you go, fourth round? I feel like Nick Townsend has that kind of ability, so maybe a little speedier, twitchier athlete. You agree with that?
And more physical.
Yeah.
Look, recruiting ranking is always interesting in our business, right? Jatavion Sanders was a 5-star athlete, ranked athlete. I think Nick Townsend's better, but he's not ranked that high. He's ranked around 95 to 100. So recruiting rankings are always interesting, but I agree with you on Nick Townsend. I think he's a twitchier athlete. I think he's got more speed, and I think he's a more physical player.
All right. The other things that are going on right now that we need to talk about, one, you kind of broke the news yesterday about Aiden Anding, a young man out of Ruston, Louisiana, that Texas really paid a lot of attention to earlier in the process than just about any major school. I would say more than any other major school. Then a week before he was going to announce what looked like it would be Texas, LSU comes calling.
Yeah.
And it became a real recruitment at that point in time. Tell folks exactly what is going on now with Aiden Anding, because it looked like he was going to visit LSU, but now what's up?
Yeah, I spoke with Aiden Anding Friday, and he told me he's going to decide Sunday if he's going to make the LSU visit at the end of the month. And that sounded pretty iffy to me, I'll be honest. So if that doesn't happen, then I think he makes a decision within a week or 10 days out of Texas, Arkansas, with Miami probably third on that list. So that is really good news for Texas if he cancels that LSU visit the last weekend in July, because if he makes that visit, I think Arkansas and Texas they're swimming up creek at that point in time. But if he does not make that visit, as was kind of the impression I got from him, but he'll decide ultimately Sunday, like we said. Then if he doesn't make that visit, it's gonna be Texas or Arkansas unless Miami comes from behind. And Terry Joseph's done a really good job there in this recruitment. They got on him early. Only Miami of the big schools was earlier, but they've showed him a lot of love. They've got him on campus twice, the whole family on campus twice. And I think I think he does not have any doubt how much Texas wants him. So that'd be a big development if he canceled that LSU visit. That would be great news for Texas and Arkansas as they fight to close that one out, which could be, before July 22nd, 23rd, if he does cancel the visit.
I like it a lot. I like him a lot. And the reason why I think that I like you so much, Jerry, is he's a relatively new football player.
Yep.
And he's a 3-sport athlete, competes in track, competes in basketball, just an all-around athlete, all-state performer in the state of Louisiana. Tremendous player there. All right, let's talk a little bit more about some other news that came out. Michael Terry out of Alamo Heights, the quarterback athlete, really plays running back, plays wide receiver. Some say tight end, some say edge rusher even. He came out yesterday and said that he's now going to have a decision sooner rather than later. You and I talked about this at one point in time. We thought he might take this all the way into the season, but now it doesn't look like that. Where does his recruitment stand?
Yeah, so he had been talking behind the scenes, him and his family been talking about announcing that the Adidas All-America game, right? And we always said if he remains on that timeline. That's a long way out for these kids nowadays. And so, look, now I hear Texas and Oregon are the two programs trending. A&M, Nebraska still in the mix. We're not saying anybody's out yet. But the interesting part about that is, now, according to a couple of sources, he's also expected to try to make visits to Texas and Oregon that last weekend in July. So that would lead to that decision prior to the start of his senior season, early August, prior to practice, maybe beginning in August. So that's an interesting development. Oregon obviously is talking about running back / athlete. They have Jordan Davidson committed in the class. Texas has just told him, athlete, get here, figure it out. He obviously prefers the offensive side of the ball. He's not adverse to defense, but he prefers offense. So what I think is going to be so interesting with his decision is when him and his family sit down and talk, what does he really want to be? What does he want to try to be? Does he want to try to have the ball in his hands and play running back like this? Well, if he does, he'll probably go to Oregon. If he wants to just look at it as straight athlete, I'm okay. If they give me a shot at wide receiver, then I'm okay if I play tight end, as long as I'm on offense. I think that's probably pretty good news for Texas. But we'll see where this one goes. But I have continued to hear that Oregon and Texas are kind of separating themselves a little bit from Nebraska and Texas A&M. But again, we'll see what happens. I think they'll be very telling if that last weekend in July he shows up at Texas at the pool party, then goes to Oregon.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because you just don't see running backs his size. So if Oregon's already got 4 receivers committed too, by the way.
Exactly.
So I think they're trying to fit a round peg into a square hole in that recruitment. But you know what? They're recruiting lights out right now. Texas is going to have to really stay on that and make that a reality if the Longhorns want to win the top player in the city of San Antonio for the class of 2025 for sure. All right, Jerry, a couple other guys that may be rounding into decisions here that we need to talk about. And I'm not even going to the receivers yet, by the way. That's a different story. But Nathan Tillman out of Mansfield Timberview, he is saying that he's hoping going to have an announcement sometime this week. We believe it could be as soon as tomorrow, all the way into sometime next week. We shall see what exactly Nathan and his family decide to do there. He's down to Texas, Utah, and TCU. You've heard Utah is trending there. Is that accurate?
Yeah, what I've heard with him is the parents prefer the close to home Texas, and maybe even prefer Texas over TCU. Look, he was a one-time SMU commitment, so this has come into factor before. Now, he wasn't as highly recruited at that point in time. But yeah, I've heard that he definitely has a liking for Utah, but we'll see what happens. So it's kind of maybe a little house divided there. The final 3 are Texas, Utah, and TCU. I will say this, Bobby. I think a week and a half ago, maybe their percentage was higher for Texas than it is now with what we've heard about Utah. So there'll be some very interesting discussions this weekend amongst that family as they get close to a decision. But again, he was a previous SMU commitment. He's made 3 official visits right after, aside from SMU. That was TCU, Texas, and Utah. So only 1 far from home. 2 other ones.
What's interesting to me? Those are the same 3 schools that Jonathan Cunningham chose Texas over. And I will say this: you know what those 2 players have in common? They can really run, and they're fairly long for their position.
Morgan Scalley does a great job at Utah. The DC and eventual head coach, I guess he's head coach in waiting now, that has done a great job for well over a decade evaluating defensive players in the state of Texas. Just go back and look at his hit rate. It's pretty high.
Yep, pretty good. But Tillman, 700-meter guy as well. Texas trying to add speed in the secondary, a secondary that's not all that fast compared to where they want to be, at least as of right now. All right, the other one, DJ Sanders, defensive lineman, out of Belleville. He seems to be down to Texas A&M, although we've heard Michigan's still involved a little bit there. Do we have a time frame on him? It seems like there hasn't been much news. Last week, it would make a lot of sense given the hurricane went through Belleville a little bit. But have we heard much on DJ Sanders, defensive lineman, right now that the Longhorns are looking at?
Of all the recruits in this cycle, you hear the least about or from DJ Sanders. So, look, it was thought it could be early July. It was thought it could be mid-July. I've also heard maybe it goes into the beginning of August. But any point in time, DJ Sanders could just announce he's committed to a school, and it wouldn't surprise any. I don't think it would be surprised to the colleges recruiting him. He's not a guy that communicates as much with colleges on a day-to-day basis like some other kids do. So I think to some level, the colleges are even kind of like, we don't know what's going to happen here, when it's going to happen. So DJ Sanders, one of the more intriguing recruits in this class. He's got a lot of upside. He's got a ways to go to get there, but got a lot of upside. But also the way he attacks the recruiting process is a little different than other kids. He's not out there on social media. He's not out there kind of hyping up a decision or a timeline. I think it's just going to come down to when him and his family are ready to announce a decision. But Texas has felt pretty good about it at times. A&M's felt pretty good about it at times. We'll see which way it goes.
All right, good stuff there. I also want to now take time to kind of corral, for lack of a better term, the wide receiver position and put it into context. Texas right now recruiting several big-time players. One of them, of course, Jamie French out of Jacksonville, Florida. Others, Jerry, Kelshawn Johnson out of Hitchcock, Tanook Hines out of Spring Decaney. They were recruiting Dalen McCutcheon. He made his decision earlier today as well. Where is Texas at right now with wide receiver recruiting in your opinion?
I think Texas is in a good spot for Jamie French, and they have been for a while. And I don't think that lead has shrunk. I think it's maybe grown a little bit after the official visit. I think Tennessee's number 2. He is scheduled based on what he told me Monday to be at Georgia the last weekend in July for an official visit. I think LSU is not a place he ends up going. I think Miami, as of right now, is not a place he ends up going. I think he may want to get out of the state and do something different, right? We've heard that before. What recruitment was that? DeCorian Moore. But I think Texas is in a really good spot for Jamie French. After that, I think it's a bit of a wild card. I mean, A&M's been trending with Kelshawn Johnson for a while. Sarkisian's been in contact. But Texas is all in. I think those are the 3 guys they're really focused on right now that are uncommitted. Jamie French, Khaleke Lockett, Kelshawn Johnson. Would they accept a commitment from a Tanook Hines on Monday? They would, but I don't think it's trending that way. I think Texas has put more into Kelshawn Johnson. Those are the 3. They're in a good spot with French. I think they got work to do on the others.
Dallas Wilson kind of toyed with the idea maybe of opening up his recruitment. We followed that a little bit. The young receiver out of Tampa Bay Tech, number 2 ranked receiver in the country. Texas had been talking to him, but he apparently or seemingly has shut it down. I guess we'll wait and see whether or not he makes a visit during the season. You just never know with situations like that as well. Our offensive line recruiting, I want to just go over that briefly. I know we're running a little long here, but Michael Fasusi, a lineman out of Louisville, and then also a young man out of Cedar Rapids, Iowa, Nick Brooks. Those seem to be the final 2 offensive line pieces on the board. Of course, the Longhorns already have 4 O-line commitments, and Jackson Christian out of Port Neches Grove, the Coleman brothers out of Cedar Hill, obviously, as well as John Mills out of San Francisco. What are your thoughts there, Jerry, between Fasusi and Brooks? What's it looking like? We've been saying Brooks looks a little like Texas right now with Georgia competing, and then Fasusi looks more and more like OU. Is that you still agree that way?
I lean to that right now. Fasusi, we've been saying was going to announce in late August. On his birthday, Friday, he put out August 21st is his decision date. Now, he put out 5 schools in that, and he threw Oregon in, I think, just to mess with Texas fans at this point. But it's still trending more Texas and Oklahoma. It'll be interesting to see if he ends up on one of those 2 campuses the last weekend in July. He did tell me yesterday that he is not visiting Oregon the last weekend in July officially. So that one is not in play as much. I still think Oklahoma and Texas. Oklahoma's been trending since the official visits. Texas won't go quietly. They're battling all the way to the end on this. We'll see which way it goes. I continue to hear a little bit more OU than Texas, but I'm not saying it's a done deal. August 21st is more than a month out when he announces his decision, and A&M won't give up either in that. So that it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. On Nick Brooks, I do think Texas is in a pretty good spot with Georgia still battling them. USC probably third on the peripheral there. And that decision could go into September. It could be more of a Brandon Baker timeline to where this thing goes in 2, 3, 4 weeks into his senior season. I think there's a date he has in mind in September right now. We'll see if that moves up. Obviously, it could move up. But I think Texas remains in a pretty good spot over Georgia in that one right now. I think the key to watch with Georgia is do 2 or 3 other offensive linemen start committing. If that would be a telltale positive sign for Texas in that recruitment.
Yeah, good stuff there. All right. I think that's going to do it for today's episode. We'll be waiting for a young man out of Spring Decaney to announce on Monday for sure. That's at 4:00 on Monday. Nick Townsend, the tight end athlete there. There are other news and notes that we're waiting on too. I mentioned Nathan Tillman literally could be any moment. Tanook Hines announces on Monday as well. You would think Kelshawn Johnson will try to do it this week, the wide receiver out of Hitchcock. You know, we'll see exactly where all this goes right now. Other guys are waiting until August, like Jamie French, Khalid Lockett, Michael
Faramo.
Madden Faramo is another one we didn't even get to today. I also want to say congratulations once again to Jonathan Cunningham. Congratulations to him. He's the newest Longhorn commitment, now giving Texas 14 pledges on the campaign. All right, that'll do it for this Saturday afternoon update. For Gerry Hamilton, I'm Bobby Burton. Hook 'em.